Okay, here we go again. In this video, we're going to be simplifying absolute value expressions using orders of operations to help us. One thing we have to recognize whenever we do absolute values, we have to think about them following under the same order of operations as parentheses. Meaning whenever you have stuff inside absolute values, make sure you take care of that first. So let's take a look at one of our 5 examples. In our first example here, in example 1, we're just saying, hey, take care of the stuff in our absolute values. So in example 1a, we have 5 plus 12. This gives us 17. Then we have to remind ourselves, we have not taken the absolute values just yet, so bring down the absolute value bars. Then we're saying, oh, well, what's the absolute value of 17? Oh, that's just positive 17. In example 1b now, we have to take care of, again, the things inside the absolute values. We have 5 minus 12, which gives us negative 7. Then we bring down the absolute value bars. Then this asks us, well, what's the absolute value of negative 7? Remind ourselves that this is just positive distances, because that's what absolute values are. So we just end with the answer of positive 7. On to our next problem. In example 2 now, we're involving some addition and subtraction operations. So in part A here, first we want to understand that we have to simplify the absolute values before we can do anything else. So if I have 4 minus 7, this gives us negative 3 inside absolute values. But what about the rest of the work here? Well, first, since we didn't do anything with the 15, we bring down the positive 15. Since we didn't do any addition, we bring down the addition symbol. So now in our next step here, what does it say? Well, it says we have 15 plus the absolute value of negative 3. Before we can add anything, we have to take care of the absolute value of negative 3. The absolute value of negative 3 here is just positive 3. Then we bring down every single operation or values we haven't done anything with. So we bring down the 15. Then we bring down the addition sign. So we're just left with 15 plus 3. So 15 plus 3, this just gives us positive 18. And we're done with part A. In part B now, we have to worry about negative values and absolute values. So first we take care of the absolute values again. So we have negative 4 minus 7, which gives us negative 11 inside of absolute values. But what we want to do is carry down the subtraction symbol because we haven't done any subtraction yet. And then bring down our 15. So as follows, we now have negative 11 inside absolute values minus 15. Before we can do any subtraction, we have to take care of the absolute values. So we're going to take care of the absolute values. The absolute value of negative 11 is going to just give us positive 11. Since we haven't done any subtraction, we're just going to bring down the subtraction symbol. Since we did nothing to the 15, we'll also bring this down. Now we have 11 minus 15, and this ends up being negative 4. So before we move on to the next example here, we just want to note that it's okay to have negative answers when absolute values are involved. We just have to make sure that the absolute values is only a particular part of our simplifying our expressions here. So on to example 3. In this third example, we're now dealing with multiple absolute values. In the first problem, part A, we have the addition that we need to take care of, but that only occurs after we do any absolute values. And in part B, we have subtraction that we're going to have to do at some point. But again, we can only do that after all the absolute values has been taken care of. So let's look back at part A. We're going to first take care of what's 4 minus 7. Well, this gives us negative 3 inside of absolute values. The addition symbol, since we didn't do any addition yet, we're going to bring it down. Then we're going to have the absolute value of whatever 2 minus 6 is, which so happens to be negative 4. Now, before we can do any addition, again, we have to take care of all the absolute values. So in the first part here, we have the absolute value of negative 3, which gives us just 3. We're going to bring down the addition sign because we haven't done anything with that just yet. So plus. Then we have to take care of the absolute value of -4, which gives us +4. In this last step here, all they're asking us is what is 3 plus 4? Oh, that's just 7. Okay? Now on to part B. Very similarly, we're going to take care of each of the absolute value stuff first. In the first one, we have the absolute value of -4 minus 7, which is going to be the absolute value of -11. We bring down the subtraction symbol because we're not going to do anything just yet because we still have absolute values to take care of. And in the second absolute value, we have the absolute value of 13 minus 6, which is the absolute value of 7. Okay. Next, we have to take care of each of the absolute values now. So the absolute value of 11, -11, is +11. We're going to bring down the subtraction symbol first because order of operations still tells us, hey, got to take care of those absolute values. Then I have the absolute value of 7, which is just 7. Now, here, we can finally do the subtraction because there's no more absolute values to worry about. So we're just saying, what is 11 minus 7? So 11 minus 7 is 4. And so that's how we deal with multiple absolute values. We first take care of all the absolute values, then perform any additional operations afterwards. On to example number 4. So in example 4 now, we're mixing things up. We're having both absolute values and parentheses. So what we want to be worried about is whenever we have absolute values, the value needs to end up being positive. However, whenever we have parentheses though, it can be both positive or negative because parentheses is its own set of operations. So let's see what we mean. Let's take a first look at part A here. So we got to first take care of the values inside the absolute value. So we have 4 minus 7, which gives us -3. Then we have the absolute value bars around it. Then we bring down the addition sign because we haven't done any addition yet. We still got to take care of the parentheses. In the second part, we have the parentheses, but inside the parentheses, we're going to do some subtraction. We have 2 minus 6, which gives us -4. So again, before we can add, we have to take care of absolute values. So the absolute value of -3 here is going to be +3. Then now here, we have to be careful. The addition sign is going to be overtaken by the subtraction sign. Because what is a positive number times a negative number? Well, that's going to be a negative number. So here now, we're going to have a -4. So in order to finish this problem, we have 3 minus 4, which is going to be -1. Now moving on to part B. So in part B, we're first starting off dealing with the parentheses. So inside this parentheses is 2 minus 6, which is going to give us -4. We're going to bring down the subtraction symbol because we're not going to do any subtraction yet. Order of operations doesn't tell us we can do that yet. We then take care of the absolute value part. Well, what do we mean by taking care of the absolute values? Well, first we need to clean up what's inside. Inside here, we have 4 minus 7, which gives us -3 inside the absolute values. Now, in the next step here, the -4 has parentheses. But since there's nothing in the front here we need to worry about, all that's telling us is that we can drop the parentheses and just have -4. Then we bring down the subtraction symbol because we're not going to do any subtractions just yet because we still have to take care of the absolute value. The next part now, we have to take care of the absolute value of -3, which would be +3. So we're going to indicate that we performed the absolute values by drawing parentheses. So inside the parentheses, I now have a +3. So what we're going to do before we do any subtraction, we're going to clean this up. So now we have negative 4 minus 3. So negative 4 minus 3 is just going to be negative 7. So one thing to note about in our example problem for part B is we have to be very careful about the set of absolute values that comes second here. We are going to end up with a negative 3 here. However, we do note that we have a negative 3 inside the absolute values, and that's not the reason it's negative. The reason it's negative is because there's originally a negative operation or subtraction operation at the very beginning or in between here. And so this is the end of our fourth example. Moving on to our fifth example. So what's going on in this one? In this problem, we're going to throw everything in. We're going to have multiplications with absolute values and parentheses. So let's check out the first part in part A. So we're going to take care of the absolute values. So we have the absolute value of 9 minus 7, which is going to give us the absolute value of positive 2 inside here. Then we're going to bring down the negative 2. We have to indicate that saying, hey, normally we have to maybe subtract 2 or multiply by 2. But we're going to hold off because we have to follow orders of operations. We got to take care of what's inside the parentheses first. So inside this parentheses, I have a negative 12 minus a 15, which gives us negative 3. So before we can do anything, again, we got to clean everything up, meaning we got to take care of the absolute value. The absolute value of 2 is just going to be 2. Then we bring down the negative 2 and the parentheses of negative 3. Now, we have to remind ourselves, in the order of operations, we've got to do multiplication before any addition or subtraction. So what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that we need to take negative 2 times negative 3. This will give us a positive 6. And we're going to bring down the 2 that we haven't done anything with yet. So in our final result here, what this really says is we have 2 plus 6, which gives us an 8. So then that's it for part A. Now in part B, we're mixing some stuff up. We're starting off with parentheses now. So inside the parentheses, we have to take care of this. So we have 2 minus 6, which will give us negative 4. We're going to bring down the negative 3 because we're not subtracting anything. We're not going to multiply anything before we take care of all the absolute values and all the parentheses. Then we have the absolute value of whatever 9 minus 17 is. So 9 minus 17 is going to give us negative 8 inside our absolute values here. So the first thing we have to take care of is the parentheses of negative 4. Since there's nothing in the front here we have to worry about, there's no multiplication, there's no addition, subtraction, etc. We're just going to have negative 4. But we cannot add or subtract anything or multiply anything until we take care of the absolute value of negative 8. So as a result, we're just going to bring down the negative 3. To indicate that we're going to simplify the absolute value of negative 8 here, we're going to draw up some parentheses. So this parentheses tells us that we've taken care of the absolute value of negative 8, which is just going to be 8. So in order to finish this problem now, we're going to bring down the negative 4. Again, we're not going to do anything with this negative 4 because we now have multiplication to deal with. We're going to multiply negative 3 and the positive 8. The reason we're multiplying here is because absolute values are like parentheses. Whenever we perform the absolute values, if there are any other numbers in front of it, in this case a negative 3, we have to indicate the simplification of the absolute values with parentheses. So Now we're going to take negative 3 times 8, which gives us negative 24. Now that there's no more parentheses to deal with, no more absolute values to deal with, we can finally combine our like terms at the very end here, meaning just subtract. We have we have negative 4 minus 24, which gives us a negative 28. And there we go. Huzzah! We're done. Here are this is the basics of simplifying expressions with absolute values.